Hey friend, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new, welcome. I'm Jeff, and today is another new creative prompt that I'll be doing. Today I'm going to be using a photograph as the basis of an artwork, and I'm going to be drawing over the top of it using my iPad and Adobe Fresco and making, I guess, like a photo collage mixed media artwork. So with this style of drawing over the top of a photo, it is something I've done in the past and I have wanted to explore it more. So the first time I did this was in 2019, and it was through a collaboration with a clothing brand called Good Day Girl. So they essentially went in the studio, took their photos, and then gave the photos to me and said, all right, could you draw an ice cream in this hand, or I want to have stars around her in this other image. So it was really fun to be able to work in this way where it was like painting but not painting, I guess. At this stage, I was just using Photoshop. I didn't have an iPad and I was still pretty fresh to the whole technology side of things, so I really love the images. I think, which one would be my favorites? I think I really love the ice cream artwork. I think that's my favorite for sure. So the second time I did this process was in 2020, and it was through a collaboration with a friend who is a makeup artist, and we wanted to pitch to a arts magazine to have like a spread of our work and to sort of get more exposure from that. So what we decided to do was that he would do his makeup and then take a photo of it like he would normally do, and then send it to me, and then I would create some kind of illustrative embellishments and details around him that is inspired by the makeup. I really love this project because it was more of an unknown of what I was going to be getting, so it was just like fun to play, and obviously it was just for our own sort of collaborative process. So there was no sort of rules on what it had to look like, and there was no, feedback from a client or anything like that. So it was just fun and playful. And so this really got me thinking that I want to do more of this style of work because it's super collaborative, and I wanted to be able to work with more photographers and stylists and potentially like performers and musicians, and then even there's the element of publications as well. And I saw there was a really big chance of getting my work out there and really starting to meet more people and just in general make more stuff. And so yeah, I knew that I had to go off and play with this idea more, which then led me to, I think it was during lockdown or around lockdown phase, and I started creating a series of artworks where I was using photographs of essentially celebrities and people that I loved and created backgrounds around them. And there was like 3 really big points that came out of this. So I was able to show more of my personality, which was great because I was using photos of people that I loved, like wrestlers and reality TV stars and musicians. And so it was a really great conversation starting point. So when I was posting things out, people can start to see, what I liked outside of just drawing. The second is that obviously there's a chance that the person might see your artwork and love it, and who knows, something could come of that, or just in general knowing that they know it exists is also really great. And then the third one, I guess, is more the business side of things, and it obviously is an example to show potential clients of what is possible. It goes back to that idea of, going off and making examples of the work that you want to be known for. And this one did work because I started to get messages from friends who asked if I could do decorative backgrounds around their photos for Instagram as well. So yeah, that was great. So that leads me to now as to why I wanted to step back into it, and now I want to see where I'm at and give it a crack whilst using my iPad. So that leads to now, and I have a photo that was taken during a photo shoot that I did with my friend Sean, who is an amazing photographer. They were in the same studio as me for quite a while, and I just loved her aesthetic. And so I decided to get her on board to take some product shots of all my jewelry. I'll put some photos up here. The thing about her work that I love is that it's so surreal and dreamy and magical kind of feeling, and we were really able to bring our two aesthetics together. And for the photo shoot, I really wanted to make a cardboard Jeff world that all my jewelry sat in. And yeah, it was just mind-blowing how she could take my cardboard and the tools that I use, like paints and scissors and hot glues and things like that, and turn them into these beautiful photos. During the shoot, we decided that we would also take some blank photos of the sort of Jeff world scenarios. So there was a chance of me being able to draw onto them and sort of use them in a collagey way. So yeah, it's finally, like 2 years on from the photo shoot, and I'm getting around to using one of the photos. And so the one that I'm going to use is this one. I'll put it here on the screen somewhere. I really love the feel of this photo. The color palette's really nice. And there's a lot of potential that I can see in using it. So what I'm going to do is just flip over now to my iPad and go through sort of the setup of everything, and then I'll get making on the artwork. So let's go. Okay, so I've got my iPad open, I've got the image here, and I'm just going to go through and do a bit of blocking for the image. And this is sometimes something that I do when I have a reference point to start from, and I want to make sure that I sort of explore all my options and sort of lead with the most exciting idea and the thing that looks the best. So for this blocking stage, the first thing I like to do is to consider all of the levels in the artwork. Here's an example of I've gone through and just broken down all the potential levels. So obviously level 1, 2, 3, and 4, sort of building everything up. And you can either, move up the frame or down the frame. And then with these green arrows, it's also interesting to consider the idea of what's coming into frame as well. So with level 1, it's like what's coming up over the ledge of level 1 space. And then for up the very top, what could potentially be coming over the top or sitting on the top of this block and potentially making like a level 5. So that's a really easy way to start off working out your artwork. Like for me, I look at that as potentially, so there could be 4 different things happening on those different levels. And so the next thing I like to go through and consider is scale as well. So if I look at these different levels, as I could play with scale in this way. So looking at things in a more miniature, smaller space. So the fact that the photograph is already sort of creating this miniature world in the page. I love this idea of making it like an even mini world of like, what's inside that little door. Or it could be, playing with this scale and having sort of different proportions can make it really fun. Moving on from there, it's like, adding in more different types of portal spaces. So like whether it's like little sinkhole, little tunnels, or more windows over here, just playing with all the different surfaces and how I could interact with them and using the scale in different ways just to see what feels right. With this one as well, I started to add in some figures. So playing around with little mini people feels really fun and imaginary because it plays with your mind, because you understand cardboard in real life being a particular size. And by making the people the same size as the cardboard makes you think more surreal and fantasy. Whereas this purple person is obviously still small, but it feels a little bit more realistic, I guess, in some way. So for me, at the moment, this green small miniature world is my favorite approach. Another way of looking at the scale is, again, coming out of frame. So thinking about even bigger, huge giant kind of feel. And the idea of like someone coming down and picking up this miniature tiny thing on the platform could be kind of fun. There's this idea of, again, coming out of the frame and like these giant platforms. This makes it more of like a tableau, I guess, so like this like sort of scene. It makes me question like, what does the person look like? It also means I don't have to draw all of the character, which is also kind of fun. And then this is the third option, which I've sort of went on after looking at all of those ideas. I went back, and because I like that little green human figure, I decided to play around with how they interact with the different levels on that miniature scale. So bringing those first two breakdowns of the levels and then scale together and coming up with this idea. And I love how they're interacting and playing with it. It's super playful, still imaginary, and yeah, so that's where I'm at with that idea, I guess. The next thing you can also look at is your zones. And I guess this is similar to your platforms and sort of looking at your different levels. But for this, obviously, like the zone 1, this big wall does pull your attention straight away. So having my focal point around here makes more sense, and then potentially whatever they're doing can direct your eyes down to level 2 and even potentially down to level 3, and that's the kind of way that feels most organic and natural to move through the work. And then leaving this column as like negative space and blank breathing space. So there's different ways you can always approach things, but for me, I like to just figure out all the different options first and then see which ones I like the most to roll with. So with that being said, the next sort of concept I thought of was this idea of using this top zone as a focal point. You're going to instantly draw yourself to the human's face and the character, but then their eyes directing you down to the flower. Maybe the flower is looking down here, and then maybe there could be something down on that third level or in that third zone. I like it, but it feels a little bit too, like, the scale is too human-based and it feels too normal. So then I went back to that original concept of the small little green figures, and I really like this idea of playing on the different landscape, playing on the world as like a jungle Jimmy kind of thing. Definitely reminds me of Lemmings. And I think in particular, this sort of like hanging around, like hanging off the cliff and climbing up feels really nice. Having their feet up here and sort of like pulling them up, again, creates like more world building out of frame, which plays with the scale really nicely. This person here is a little bit creepy. I might have to play around with that, but I just like the idea of them like coming into frame. And this guy here just watching and chilling out and waiting for his turn to climb up the wall. And then I just played around with this this zone up here where people are climbing up. So, you know, maybe it's more fun and playful to have someone standing, like piggybacking the other person up and lifting them up rather than and sort of like focusing in all the actions. So, you know, up here in this top part of the frame is everyone is climbing up to here, and then in this bottom part of the frame there's only two figures, one person climbing up, and maybe even this person is even smaller sitting down here, and it just plays around with the framing of everything in a little bit more of an interesting way. So I think that is my favorite option for this mini Lemmings idea. And the final one that I just had to throw out there as well is large scale hand, almost like pulling a mini character up out of the world as if it's like, I don't know, an evacuation point in some way. And the little guy's been like standing there waiting for the big giant person to come and pick them up. This one's obviously more simple and stripped back. So but it works nicely, and having all this space as like open negative space, I think just balances it out really nicely. So that is my first sort of like blocking stage that I will sometimes go through. And for this artwork, I think for the next stage of actually coming up with the refined idea is that I'm going to work on this idea And next, what I'm going to do is just work out what these figurines and creatures look like, if they're going to be somewhat human or just blobby characters. And I'll probably do that off camera, maybe do a little time lapse, not too sure. And then we'll come back and then I'll explain the next part. So, all right, see you soon. Welcome back. So I have gone away and done some drawing and refined the concept, and I'm just going to put it on the screen now as a time lapse and just like chat through what I did and condense it all down, because it was about like an hour or so of drawing, which, yeah, condense it down, make it better and a bite size to watch. So I went and got the Lemmings artwork and I just put the transparency down really low and used it as a guide. And I wanted to use each figure as a way to explore sort of different ways of drawing the figures, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to make human looking characters or like monster looking characters. So yeah, each one is going to look slightly different. And I also like to just do an outline of everything first and then come back over in another layer and do the color over the top. So for the first sitting figure, I just went and did a really basic human looking person and played around with just putting regular clothes on them. Nothing too crazy, just play around with sort of like blobbing out the feet a little bit and the hands. Pretty straightforward with that one. Then for the second hanging character, I wanted to make them a little bit more top heavy, and that just played with the idea of sort of the dangling feet and perspective of just like trying to hang there and letting the body go limp, I guess. And then the second part that was a little bit tricky was working out which way I wanted to draw the head. At first it was sort of front on, sort of like looking up, but then I realized it looked a little bit weird, so I just made it more of like a profile shot of the face, and that allowed the illustration to be a bit more cartoony as well, which is good. The climbing person, so I really love this pose. I think it's really dynamic. And again, I was just playing around with the different angles and also the face, turning it so it's no longer looking up, but rather sort of to the side profile. So it just like made more sense to like be able to see more of the face. And then also I wanted to give them longer hair, because then I can really emphasize that there's gravity and everything is sort of like being pulled down in some way. It also was because I wanted to play with the different styles of hair. So the first person was a bit more spiky and the second one a bit more longer and wavy. And then the human ladder duo. So I first started with the top figure because I thought it just made more sense to make sure they were all spread out and hanging the way they would be. And then no matter what, the person on the bottom I could just squish down, because that's naturally what would happen to them if someone is using them as a ladder. The facial expression on the bottom one I really love. That's something I'm trying to work on more, is to give my characters more expressions, because at the moment I'm just doing a lot of smiley faces. Actually, all I do is really smiley faces. So I'm trying to now set myself a goal to do different expressions. Maybe I'll do that as another video. Good idea, write it down. And then also for the top person, I tweaked the face so it was on the side again. And then finally, I didn't actually put in the legs of the top characters along the very like top of the frame. I just didn't bother with it right now. I thought it was full enough and there was more than enough for me to play with. And so now it was time to add the color and do the renderings that way. So I used the same process. I just took the layer that I just drew of the finer details and I made it really light transparency, and then just used it as a guide to draw over the top of it. And I also decided to go with blue tones because I thought blue with like the orangey browny tones works really well and would make the characters pop. And also it means that it makes it a little bit more surreal and imaginary because they're all just like blue characters in some way and not like skin color. So for my file management of late, I've been trying to use the mask tool as much as possible. So I essentially start off by drawing one shape that is the full figure's silhouette, and then I would add all the details on separate layers on top of it with the masking tool being used to keep everything contained within that silhouetted shape. It's something that is helping to really keep my sketches and my concepts really clean and crisp, and it's just like a really great tool to use. I actually have a video that I did last month where I explain the masking tool really briefly and like how I've been utilizing it in my work. So if that's something that you might want to watch, go and like check it out. I'll link it in the description below. But yeah, it's totally been a game changer for when I've been doing these mock-ups for sure. So with the guy sitting down, he's super cute. I love the spiky hair. I got rid of the hat altogether because I just didn't want the hat at all. For the hanging guy, the clothes I went for more of like a gymnastics kind of vibe. The hands were definitely my downfall. I definitely would need to refine them more for if I wanted to use it later on. They just don't look 100% like he's gripping on. I think it's the thumb placement. I just need to work that out a little bit more. But for this, totally fine. I'm happy just to let it ride. I think it's just like super fun and just slightly different from the first person as well. For the climbing person, I did a variation on the face. So I added in the heart cheeks, which is cute. And then again for the hair, because it was long hair, I wanted to play off a recent illustration I did where I was doing this sort of like wavy fringe with hair clips and then the long hair coming off it. It's a really fun style that I've been starting to explore more, and so I wanted to put that on this character. And then also changing the shape of the feet to being more of these like webbed feet made me ended up doing the scales and sort of turn it into this fish-like character. So you notice they've all got sort of like slightly different feet, which is, yeah, something that I wanted to do intentionally. I then also, which you may have already noticed, was scaling them all down to being a little bit smaller and feeling sort of like tiny in this environment. I think it makes the environment look a lot bigger and more vast and sparse, really. And it just gives, I feel, more intention and drama to the actions that they're all doing. So like the fact that he's hanging off the cliff, it feels more dramatic because he's smaller, rather than just nearly being closer to the ground kind of thing. So yeah, I think making them scale-wise smaller was a really good move. I completely got rid of the human ladder duo because I just thought there was more than enough happening. Once the color was added to it, I really wanted that space in that top zone, just sort of like left a bit more blank. I did brainstorm if I wanted to put something else there in that zone. So I was thinking about what these characters are doing, like why they're climbing up. And so I thought maybe they could be in some kind of like a race or a challenge. I did a few little mock-ups of like a hanging prize or an object or a treasure or something that they're trying to get to and collect, and really like sort of gamify the scene. But I then decided just to not do it at all because I just liked it really blank and sort of being a little bit more obscure in what they're actually doing. And then I ended up with this, like the artwork. It's all done. This took me about an hour or so to do. And there's definitely more I could do with it if I wanted to. I think refining the characters a little bit more, maybe even adding in some extra elements. But as a concept like this, I think it's really fun, and I'm really happy that I actually did it. I could not help myself. I went and I made 2 ideas of how I could turn this into a mock-up for a project going forward. And I guess like disclaimer, the graphic design work that I've done in these 2 examples is not that great. So they were quick, they're rough, so don't judge me on the graphic design. You should still get the idea of it anyway. So the first one is for a website homepage. I think this layout, and going back to those zones that I spoke about at the very beginning, so that first zone 1, the big open space, is kind of like a big blank canvas for me. So that could be my different tabs for all the different pages on my website, having the home button in the top corner, and then my social links down the bottom, playing around with the colors from the actual illustrations. And I think it could be like a really successful homepage. I think it has a really playful vibe to it, but it also looks really slick because the photography is really great as well. And itself as like a page really embodies my work and gives you a feel of who I am as an artist, which I think is a really great and smart way to approach your website, is like have it embody who you are as a maker. The second example is a cover for a publication. So, it could be a book or a zine or something like that. It could be really lo-fi right up to like big time publication. I've always had doing illustrations for a book, I guess like kids book in some way, but some kind of book. It's been on my list of things I want to do in my lifetime for sure. So for this example, again, I've used that top zone to put the title of the work. I just made it up, Blue Tail Adventures, playing off them being blue, obviously. And when I put a collection of short stories. So it gives the suggestion of what the story could be about in some way, or the tone of the book, and doing the little crediting down the bottom. It just, it looks, I think, really fun as a cover. And so, they're just like two examples of how I could take this further. And, both of these could be used in a portfolio or a resume or something like that, or to a cold call email to someone that you want to collaborate with, that just shows what it could, what the work could be like that you create. And I think I'm just going to leave it there. I've really enjoyed doing this prompt. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. And if you're a photographer who might want to collaborate on a project like this, shoot me a message as well, because I'm totally open to collaborations. I'm pretty open to anything. It could be more portraiture style or like fashion photography, whatever. I always want to make more friends and collaborate with more people. So with that, I'm gonna love you and leave you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.